people joining on Zoom potentially. But we're ready to go ahead and start our presentation portion of the evening. And so I'm going to turn it over to John Bosket, who is the lead on our consultant team. But if you have any questions, I'm sure that they'll be able to answer that. And thanks for joining us this evening.
All right, thanks for coming. See, just for reference, let's see, Kaylin Schmaltz, you can put your hand up, also on the consultant team. We have a lot of city consultant team members here, and they're all available to answer your questions tonight. And then all the city folks that are here, if you could raise your hand for everybody. So a lot of people here can answer questions. So let's see if you can. All right. So the plan is, this is hopefully maybe around a 15 kind of minute presentation. And really it's kind of a, I guess, a narrated kind of overview of a lot of the stuff that's on the boards here. So you kind of know what all of that is if you haven't got a chance to get all the way through that. And then we'll open it up for questions. And I think we're thinking about 6:30. We'll just kind of turn it back to what it was before and just kind of walk it around at your own pace and answering questions of the team, and we'll be there to do what we can. I can definitely do that. So if you haven't seen it already, there is a transportation system plan page on the city's website. I think it's cityofestacada.org/TSP. But I just go to my search engine and put an Estacada TSP and it pops up first thing every time. So it's been super easy to find. So you can catch up there on where we're at in the project. The project documents that we're putting out are posted way down at the bottom if you keep scrolling down. Meeting summaries, so you can see the conversations we're having with our stakeholder groups are on there and a lot of the things that they're telling us. So it's a great resource to stay engaged. I believe there's also a way you can respond back to the city, provide comments. But right now, starting today for the next 3 weeks, there's an online version of this. So all the boards that are up there, all there in digital versions. The same comment form that hopefully you've grabbed is there to respond to digitally as well. So, not only for folks that weren't able to come here tonight, but, if you want to take more time filling out your comment forms, you can do that and either return it to the city or you can just fill it out online if you'd like, if that's easier for you. So again, that should be up for the next 3 weeks. How are we doing? Okay. So I can start anyways. I'll go slowly and pretend I can see what's on the boards from this distance. So to start, kind of what are we doing? What is a transportation system plan? If you aren't familiar, the city does have a transportation system plan already. It was adopted about 2007. It's gone through a couple minor updates. But obviously with everything that's gone on in the community, a lot of growth, maybe some of the vision for how the community wants to grow has changed since then. So it's a good time to update that. So the TSP, it's a 20-year plan. So while we're kind of recalibrating and looking at now, we're doing that for the next 20 years of growth. And here we go. So you can go to the second slide. And so we're looking at kind of the major modes of transportation in the city. So, what do we need over the next 20 years to help with, driving around the city, walking around the city, riding bikes, using transit? Those are really kind of the major components. And why is the TSP important? Well, one is it is an extension of your comprehensive plan, and so the city council will adopt this. And one kind of obvious thing is just knowing what your long range needs are and kind of roughly what things are going to cost and how the community feels about various projects. It's going to help the city prioritize over time. Because I can promise you there'll be far more projects you really want to do than you can probably pay for in the next 20 years. That's pretty much true in any city you go to. So being able to really zero in on what are the kind of the strategic projects of the highest value for the community is an important part of this exercise. Also, it's almost a prerequisite if the city wants to apply for state or federal funding to help build a certain project. It's pretty much got to be in an adopted transportation system plan. So getting out in front of that will also help the city position for future funding. And so obviously, kind of the why it's important to do this now, Estacade's population is projected to grow by 75% over the next 20 years. So now is a good time to think carefully about, what we need to do to accommodate that growth and make sure that, you still can have the quality of life that everybody wants. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So looking into the future, if you didn't see the board that's in the back of the room there, it talks a little bit about future growth. And the map on the right side here, which you can see more closely if you go back there, it's outlining a lot of the development it's been approved by the city, but a lot of it hasn't built out yet. So it's in process. So obviously, the purpose of the TSP, it's not intended or really is going to drive growth. It's more of understanding what we're projecting is going to happen and responding to that and hopefully accommodating that growth. Just a few notes, the Estacade's population, it's grown quite a bit since that last TSP update. And just kind of for reference, and these should be familiar numbers if you're following some of the housing project. The next 20 years, about 1,700 new households and about 700 new jobs are forecasted to be added to Estacada, and the population will grow from about 5,000 to about 8,800 in that time. But if you look at that map that showed, all these areas where a lot of developments have already been approved, a lot of that, this 1,428 households have already been approved. So remember I said 1,700 was the total projected. So it's something like 84%, if I remember my math right, of our 20-year forecast. It's been approved, it hasn't built. It could take years for some of that to build. We'll have to wait and see what the market, drives. But I think it's definitely telling us that it's, that growth projection, I would certainly expect you're going to reach that within the next 20 years. And so, some of the things we're seeing obviously that are going to change a lot, assuming that, you don't really make a lot of more investments in your transportation system over the next 20 years, but you get all that growth. Some of the congested areas are likely going to be trying to turn out onto the highway. I think, the highway itself, once you're on it, you can probably get north and south still pretty well. But if you want to turn left out or turn across the highway, especially during those busier commute times, you might be waiting quite a while. There are also some areas like on Eagle Creek Road on 6th Avenue that may get fairly congested. So, as I'll get to later, at this point in the project, we haven't really got into looking at solutions. We're really more in the stage of identifying what are the issues we need to address. We can start to see, some areas along there that are kind of be hot spots. And go ahead and go to the next slide. So also on the poster back in that corner, one of the things we did early in the project is we worked with our stakeholder group and city council to establish some goals and objectives for the project. And these are what we use to guide our work. So it's kind of like, what we use to know if we've achieved the desired outcome. So it'll not only guide the types of solutions we develop, but in the end, we're going to rate our solutions using these, and that may guide the prioritization process. And so those key areas are, goal one is safety. So it's improve the safety of the transportation system for all users. And these are not in order of importance. You could mix these up in any order. Goal two is active transportation, which is typically walking and biking. So it's complete safe networks of facilities that make walking and biking an attractive choice by people of all ages and abilities. The third one is mobility and accessibility. So it's promoting efficient travel that provides access to goods, services, community facilities, homes, and employment to meet the daily needs of all users, as well as to local and regional activity centers. The fourth one is equity. So it's support an equitable transportation system that justly allocates the benefits and burdens of transportation projects, policies, plans, and processes. Then we have environment, which is minimizing environmental impacts on natural resources and encourage carbon neutral or efficient transportation alternatives. This number 6 is economic development, so promote economic development and tourism. 7th is capital investments and funding. So it talks about promoting cost-effective investments to the transportation system. And the last one is regional coordination, which of course you have to do, and it benefits everyone, is to coordinate with other jurisdictions to plan, fund projects that better connect us to Decatur with the region and are consistent with local, regional, and state plans. And you can find all of that and more, the objectives that detail all of those out on the TSP website. That document is there. Go ahead. So just to kind of touch on, and this is a pretty high level overview of maybe some of the key things that we're seeing or hearing on the kind of the major modes of transportation. On the walking network, one note with walking and biking I believe it was adopted in 2017, I'll say. The city did an update specifically to the walking and biking parts of their TSP, a fairly significant update. So it's called the Active Transportation Plan, which I think you should be able to find also on the city's website. So that already has a lot of projects for improving the walking and biking network in the city, and we plan to pull all of that forward and not lose that work. So some kind of key things, that we're seeing and hearing on this is, sidewalks obviously can be very inconsistent, intermittent and poor, especially in some of the older neighborhoods. Obviously, the newer neighborhoods are getting complete brand new sidewalks, and obviously they're built to a more current standard, where some of the older sidewalks may not have been. Which kind of leads to the bullet further down about some areas may have sidewalks and ramps, but they may not be up to current Americans with Disabilities Act standards. Especially, I think you'll find that in a lot of the older places. There aren't a lot of marked or enhanced crosswalks. A good example is of one that's very marked and enhanced would be like on 6th over by the schools, where it's got some flashing beacons. Some of the earlier conversations we've had, people would like to see strategically some more crossings like that. Maybe especially on the highway, which is, the third bullet on there, is it's really only one, what I'd call protected way to cross the highway, and that's the signal at Broadway. And that separates folks that, live on the south side from the downtown. It separates everybody else from all the recreational opportunities. And then one thing we're just noting is, again, you look at that growth map, a lot of the growth is projected to happen kind of north and east. It's getting farther away from a lot of the places that people probably want to walk. And so, what are we going to do to make sure that, they can still do that conveniently? Go ahead and go to the next slide. On the biking network, if you're familiar with Estacada, there's not a lot of separate bike facilities. If you're riding a bike somewhere, you're probably riding in a street, maybe on a shared or a path somewhere. But there aren't a lot of separate bike lanes other than the highway and then some on Wade Street. They're fairly new. And then again, only one protected way to cross the highway, which is at Broadway. One particular challenge for people that might want to bike around town is just it's really hilly. And that may be fine for some people, but for other people, that might make biking tough. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. On transit, let's see. So obviously, currently you're served by Sandy Area Metro and TriMet. There is service, at least on TriMet, 7 days a week, and it's about hourly. I think Sam doesn't run on Sunday. But some things that we've kind of discussed and talked about is transit stops in particular. I mean, some of them are built out better, more comfortable, easier to cross the street and get to than others. Some of them might be difficult to get to. So that's one thing that in talking with our stakeholder group is making sure that people can get to those stops and cross the street and get to them safely, which will really help them with what we call the first last mile. If you want people to be able to walk, take or ride a bike to transit, getting to those stops is important. Again, a lot of the new development where it's coming in, it's ending up further and further away from the main transit corridor there, which is Eagle Creek, Wade, 6th and down Main Street and ending right here. And so making sure that people can still walk and bike to that transit line from future growth is important. We did look at the frequency of service. As I mentioned, it's about 1 hour fairly consistently, which might work for some people. I'd be curious to hear if there are some times a day of commute periods where that makes it difficult for people, maybe to get to and from work or get to pick up kids or whatever it is that they need to do. And then we do have a couple of park and rides here in town, but there's some uncertainty if everybody knows where they are. They don't seem to be heavily used, or I don't think the one across the street was really signed. And so if people know that that's an option available to them. So there's some kind of links to a question about what can the city do more as far as kind of outreach and education to people about what their options are. And just a note on transit, well, we'll certainly take all of the comments that people have to offer on that. Obviously, the city does not provide the transit service. And so we will share that feedback with Sam and TriMet for consideration in future transit planning efforts, but it is important to capture it here. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And then on driving, from a congestion standpoint, again, this is looking at today, what's on the map. Today, there's not a lot of congestion, really. I guess that can always be a relative term. I know at about 5 o'clock, coming out of Main Street, you can get cars backed up all the way back here, and it can take a while, but you can always go back to Broadway and use the signal and get out faster. But at least, the state and the county and the city all have adopted standards for the amount of congestion that they're, deeming acceptable. And at least as far as today goes, there's really nowhere that's not meeting those standards. So it's good for today. But again, remember when we looked at the future map, we know that that's not going to last, for the next 20 years if something doesn't change. From a safety standpoint, what this map is showing you, and you can look at more closely, up over there, is we pulled the last 5 years of crash data from ODOT and kind of looked at, what's happened as far as, I'll say, reported crashes. Obviously, if there were fender benders, a lot of times those don't get reported, so they don't show up on here. What kind of trends can we see? And the good news is, it's telling us that the vast majority of the crashes that were reported were pretty low severity, which is that's good to see. There were some areas which you would expect would have more crashes, like Eagle Creek and on the highway. So that's not surprising. Not a lot of crashes relatively that involve people walking or biking. There's 2 involved a pedestrian, 1 somebody biking. No real clear trend there. Did see that an awful lot of the crashes seem to be involving people that were turning out of a stopped approach that didn't yield. Maybe they got tired of waiting, took a gap maybe they shouldn't have. Not sure what happened there, but that did seem to be related to a lot of the crashes. And another key thing about this is, a lot of the conversations we've been having with our committees and hopefully with you tonight is, I've gotten a lot of feedback about places in town that they see safety issues. The one I've probably heard more than anything has been 6th Avenue, especially tonight, right? When it's dark and the school buses are out there and there's a sporting event and people running across the street. Heard that many, many times. But that doesn't show up on the crash data. So if the crash data only tells us so much, so it's very important that we hear from the community those places that they're seeing where they know there are risks. So we get a more complete picture of what the safety issues are that we want to address. Another thing that has come up that I'm hoping to hear more specific stories and experiences about is struggles and challenges with evacuations. I've definitely heard multiple times that that's something that needs to be addressed, but nobody yet has given me specific issues. So hopefully this will be the beginning of that conversation. If you've got some stories, I'd love to hear them. Go ahead and go to the next slide, which I think is the last one. Oh, it's not, but I'll move past this quickly. This is on the poster back there. Just kind of sharing some highlights of things that we've heard from the folks we've talked to so far. There've been a lot more than this, and actually you can go to the city's website, and as I mentioned, you can pull the meeting summaries from the DEI committee and the stakeholder group that we've talked to thus far. And following this process, when we get more comments in, I know the city's doing some specific outreach to some other stakeholder or community groups. We will document up those things and share those on the website too, so you can see more about what other people are saying. Go ahead and go to the next one. This one, I think, is my last slide. So the project schedule is in the back corner. So if you didn't see that, so kind of where we are in this roughly 18-month-long process is, we are here. You didn't see the little flag there. So I kind of break this up into three major components, and we're at the end of the understand phase, which again, it's largely us just trying to understand what are the issues, what's important to the community, what do we need to accomplish, right, with the plan, where are the hot spots. So that's the bulk of what we're trying to capture with this outreach period that we're going through right now. After we take that, then we go into the next phase, and that's where we start working on solutions. And so the next time we come at a very similar community workshop as this one, another online open house will be in the spring. And that's when we'll share the ideas that we've got, and we want your feedback on those as well. And then following that, we adjust what we need to, and that's when we move towards packaging it up into a plan and going through a public hearings process, ultimately with the planning commission and city council to adopt the updated TSP. Looks like we're thinking that will happen in the summer of 2023. And I believe that was my last slide, right? Okay. So I think we can pivot to questions now. Yes. I have no doubt that that is the case, that somebody can. Like I said, thus far in the conversations we've had, the feedback. Oh, sure. I'll repeat the question for folks that are online because I'm the only one with the microphone. Hopefully I paraphrase this correctly. So the question is about evacuation routes. And I mentioned earlier how I haven't gotten specific comments on what people experienced and what the challenges were. And I think the question was, if there are folks in the community, emergency services, police, fire, that are able to do that. We haven't, pivoted into that understand. So now I'm going into my response. We haven't pivoted into the next phase, the developing solutions, but I was anticipating they're some of the first people we're going to be talking to specifically about that. It just so happens that, like I said, a lot of the conversations we've had thus far, the importance of the issue has been raised. I just haven't had an opportunity to get specific feedback from people. And what I hear from, anyone that lives here, what they experience could be different than what I hear from, police and fire. So I'd love to hear it all. Nope.
luckily for us, we have cars in our household, we have that actually brought that one. And so, and the ones that left right at noon went right to the good, like that. And then we got fires on both sides. We didn't try one head to go out that way. So, or, you know, good. And so, yeah.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. So for those of you who are online, and we should maybe start passing this mic around for comments. But we're just kind of discussing here how there was really, because of the multiple fires that were going on, there was really just one way to get out of Estacada. And when it was time to go, everybody tried to go at once, which is what we needed to do. But that's the Traffic and Public Safety Committee might want to address that too and give some feedback on that. And if we could get some, thankfully, you know, the fire wasn't chasing behind us, although it felt like it was. And so we had a couple hours, you know, we had a few hours for everybody to get out. But if it would have been a more dire situation and we needed everybody out immediately, that could, I think that then law enforcement and fire would have had to maybe open up both lanes, you know, both directions, and put 4 lanes going downtown, 4 lanes and 2 lanes. There might have been some other alternatives. So, but for those of you listening, I just thought I'd kind of just share what the conversation is going on here. So, but if maybe we should pass this around if we have other comments or questions. You have more? Anybody want to speak now? Yes, that's a good idea. That in addition, this is maybe, that's maybe a specialty conversation that we should have in addition to just our general transportation. Any other group questions? Or are you ready to? It is loud.
So John, you mentioned that we were on kind of maybe we'd call it the discovery phase right now. The next phase, is that when you come up with maybe some proposals? I was wondering if you could give us some examples of some proposals that you've come up with before for other towns, if that would work.
Yeah, so if you've looked in your current transportation system plan, one example is you'll see, you know, for the various modes of transportation project lists. You know, it's going to vary by the modes. For, you know, the walking network, it could be strategic sidewalk infill, it could be paths. For biking, it could be, key corridors where we want to get bike lanes, or again, sharing paths, or, plotting, strategic bike routes through the city. Anything on the motor vehicle system could be, things we've talked about, I think around the room earlier, was where do key street extensions need to go to improve connectivity, right? So it's not all routing through the same streets and clogging things up, or maybe
Hello? Everybody hear me? Hello? 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 Anybody hear me? Hello, anyone hear me? Hello? Hello?
Hello, Jim.
Yes.
Sorry about that. We had a microphone issue. We can hear you.
Okay, I just want to say for everyone listening in at home, or everyone there, I got about 20% of everything that you guys are saying. You had the conversations up at the microphone, and then people in the audience were discussing items, questions, concerns. I at home did not hear any of that. Just for information only. Thank you.
Sorry
Appreciate
about
it.
that. We'll provide a little summary of the conversation afterwards.
I appreciate it, Taylor. Thank you so much.
And we'll try to pass this microphone around. It died on us, but we'll try to pass it around for other people to speak into also. If there's other questions, comments.
To introduce myself or what? Al Rademacher, Esticated Bark and Nursery. We're out in. Am I okay? Funding is a tricky business when it comes to transportation. Roads aren't cheap. A lot of this traffic issues are going to arise because of a lot of the development that's taking place. What's the breakdown between systems development charges and government assistance at various levels, whether it's state, county, city, et cetera? How does that work? To me, it sounds like when you're talking about any of these issues, from sidewalks to redoing intersections, it's just a lot of money involved, and I'm interested in how that's addressed.
I'll say if there's a broad response to how the city funds transportation projects, then I don't know if the city wants to.
Yeah.
There's not going to be one answer, I'm sure.
Right, and as John said earlier, there's going to be more projects needed than we can fund in the next 20 years, probably. But some of projects are funded directly by the developers building their development. And then there's also system development charges that we collect. So if we're expanding a system, for instance, if we are improving an intersection or widening a road, I don't know if I shouldn't speak I should be careful about what we use SDCs on, but it's for expanding the system. Then like not just maintenance to a road. If we just need to grind it and repave it, that's not a SDC eligible. because it's not expanding the system. But if we're doing something, widening the road, improving the intersection, things like that, we can use those system development charges that have come in. We also try to get grants we get grants from ODOT, and right now we're trying to get any federal kind of funding we can. Do you want to say anything, Taylor, about that too? So we do try to like broaden it out. And we have the state taxes that we get.
Yeah, I was just going to add for the way that grants and other, funding opportunities that we would have to apply for and get awarded. It's really important to have those projects. For example, let's say we identify the need for a roundabout or a traffic signal somewhere. If we have that project included in our TSP, it makes it much more likely that we would then be eligible for grant funding or other funding from these different state or federal agencies. So it's important to get things included in the TSP, even if we're not sure that the city alone can fund it. We still want to identify those projects so that maybe we can get a grant to fund it.
Also, one example of a grant that that we've received is the Community Development Block Grant. We get that from the county, and we've used that to pave Hawthorne, Ivy, Maple, Hawthorne, Ivy, Juniper, Laurel, Laurel and Maple. So those have happened over the years with the CDBG grant. Right now, this year, we're going to be doing putting in improved ADA ramps uptown on Broadway and Main, because some of those intersections don't even have a ramp at the corner. And some of them that do are really subpar and definitely don't meet standards. And so we'll use that grant to go through and improve those corners for ADA access uptown. We also have, in the downtown zone, we have our urban renewal district that helped to do Broadway. We're also going to be doing Main Street with that. And so we'll be looking at safety on Main, pedestrian safety. What type of amenities do we need to slow traffic or make traffic flow through better, make the cross traffic better? And that's going to be an urban renewal project. So we have a lot of different, it's still not sufficient to do everything, and especially not to do everything all at once, but we'll try to broaden out and pull money from different areas to make those plans happen.
So there will also be a memorandum coming. I think it's one of the next products we'll be putting out. It's talking specifically about funding, and it'll kind of have a look back at the different sources that the city has used to pay for transportation projects. And again, it's not going to be a one size fits all. There's kind of different sources that might fit different needs, or they might be restricted in various ways, or they can only be applied towards certain things. But then we'll also do kind of a rough projection out and say, what do we think the city will have to spend from at least kind of the more reliable sources, steady sources of revenue through that 20-year planning horizon. And that kind of helps us not only understand what a lot of the options are, but also kind of provides a budget, so to speak. So we know we've got, millions and millions of dollars of projects you want to do, what's realistically what you might have to work with. And, what this project won't do is it's not going to commit the city to fund things at a certain level. It's not going to, lock in a new fee system, but it usually is a catalyst for that conversation, with city council to look at that situation. And like, for one example is say, do we think our system development charges are set at the right level? Given, what the need is, what the market is demanding. Those are, it's getting back to what Melanie was talking about. So the question is, what are system development charges? Those are fees paid by development. But again, they can only really be applied towards kind of what's called capacity adding projects. So if it's an existing deficiency, like a sidewalk gap in downtown, you can't use them for that. So again, they're kind of limited to what you can use them for. Most cities end up using the bulk of them on the new streets that are needed to provide connections and access, or maybe, an intersection treatment. If it's, going to blow up an intersection, be very congested, it can address those. That's usually where you see the SDCs get spent. Yeah. I may need to bring the microphone to you.
Okay, ODOT, they're the highway coming in on 211, 224, so they don't do any highway stuff inside the city limits, right? Do they? They do. So let's say we have to take Eagle Creek and bump it out to 2 lanes on each side. Who pays for that? Yeah. Up until the growth boundary, let's say that.
Most of Eagle Creek Road is a county road. And so they would, it depends on whose jurisdiction the road is in. Sorry. The most of Eagle Creek Road is a county road still to city limits. City limits kind of jumps back and forth along that road. That the highway does, ODOT does take care of the highway out there. We are responsible for the landscaping along the sides of the road. So that's our deal. But the road itself, and we like sweeping it or plowing it. I think we take turns with ODOT. Our guys will, we do some collaboration on that. But as far as the maintenance and repair of the road, that's ODOT on the highway and the county up on Eagle Creek Road. And like where it crosses the bridge, I think a year or two ago, they were paving out across the bridge. That was, I think, a county project. So yeah. Nope. Those are county, the county does that. Right. Correct. Not for city taxes. No. Nope. And our tax rate is set. So like the taxes that we pull in from property taxes, most of that would not go, that would go in the general fund, and I'm delving too deep. So I'd like to kind of let you guys go on to another, we have another question, and then maybe I'll let you guys get back to the posters or leaving your comments. But what was I saying now? The property taxes doesn't necessarily go towards that. That's why we try to pull in, we have state funding that comes for streets, which in the past has been not enough to meet what we needed to do. But we also have, like I was talking about the grants, the 2 projects that kind of ran together up by the library. There was doing that culvert, and then just recently doing the sidewalks and the paving on towards 6th. Those were 2 separate ODOT grant projects. They didn't cover the whole thing, but they covered $100,000 of each project. So $200,000 came through an ODOT grant for that. So even on the city projects that we do, we try to pull in funds from elsewhere also. Being a small city with a growing number of residents, but still relatively small, we try to really maximize dollars we can get from elsewhere. And we do have a question online.
Megan, I think you're
Yeah,
free to
hi.
go.
Hi, my name's Megan, and I'm a community health worker here in Estacada. And I don't know if I have a question or not, but I'm just gonna talk. So in regards to the TSP and accessibility, I know you guys are gonna be addressing like gaps in sidewalks and stuff. Is that gonna include walking paths and sidewalks to schools from major neighborhoods that are popping up, especially for low income areas where kids are usually walking to school? And then also, like, is this going to include other like transportation services? Because I work for Orchid Health. We have a lot of lower income who, they live out in the outskirts, but they can't catch a bus because it's 2 miles away to walk, and things like that. So are we going to be expanding transportation services as well?
Yeah, thanks. So to answer your first question about the schools, yes, we're very interested in those routes and those needs. And that was, I know, something that a few years ago when the city was working on the active transportation plan, at the same time, the city had done some safe routes to school action plans that we kind of coordinated with and pulled in. So at least as of a few years ago, a lot of those issues were identified and projects were identified. So we want to pull those through into this work, but I think we still obviously want to keep that conversation alive because there may be new issues that weren't there 4 years ago or 5 years ago now. On your second issue, I think that very issue of folks outside of the community needing better access to transportation actually came up during one of our very first meetings on the project. So that is, I think, part of this conversation, again, because it's probably getting outside of the city's purview alone. That's, again, one of those partnership questions, with the county or others. But I think that's definitely something we want to capture and talk about in this process.
Thank you.
I think we'll let, we're a little over time on our presentation time, but staff and our consultants will still be around if you want to ask questions or leave more comments. And for those of you online, the online survey is available. And you can always call City Hall during the day too, if you want to just talk to somebody about it. Feel free to do that, but I think we'll let you get up and work on a more individual basis, unless you had any closing comments.
Only thank you for coming and
Yes.
spread the word. We want to get as much feedback as we can.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, sorry, this is Taylor in the corner. I was just gonna add the online open house, the online survey component will be open for 3 weeks. So we're really hoping that you all can help spread the word about that, share the link, encourage people to share their thoughts. There's also on the city's the project webpage, there is a link where you can submit photos or just comments, general comments, but it's intended for people to take pictures of the issues around town or of something that's working really well that you want to see more of. You can submit that on the project webpage too, which is cityofestacada.org/TSP. So yeah, thanks for coming.